I've realized that I have lost all respect for my husband's willful ignorance, and it may damage my marriage. I, 33, and my husband, 37, were having a discussion about politics and we got onto the topic of our daughter, 7, which led to me expressing my fears about her rights and bodily autonomy. For context, my husband votes Republican and I have always considered myself independent but recently have been shifting very far away from my younger, carefree attitude toward politics. I love him very much and I know for a fact that he loves me, but I have started finding his opinions naive and lacking depth. He is a very good man though and has in the past changed his mind on several things when confronted with them. Further context, my cousin lives in a strict anti-abortion state and almost died a few years ago when the doctors waited until she was actively dying of sepsis before they decided it was okay to remove the dead baby from her body even though it had been dead for weeks beforehand. So needless to say I had a wake-up call and sharpened up my principles until they are very shiny and pointy. Last night when we were talking about abortion rights being healthcare, I lost my composure out of sheer terror about the possibility of a similar disaster with my cousin happening to our daughter and how I struggle to understand how he doesn't see the problem with his party and that in fact I think he is being willfully ignorant to the danger I and my daughter face in favor of his idea about making economics work for our family. I also said that if our daughter dies due to something preventable, like the ability to get a timely and much needed abortion, or gets shot to death in school, that I would let my own mother rot in a nursing home. She votes R2. And I'd never be able to look him in the face again, which would basically be me disappearing and divorcing him. I was crying and upset and explaining how scared I was, and he asked me in a very hurt manner if I'd actually abandon him like that. I am truthful to a fault and said that I would, perhaps out of a sense of illogical grief and betrayal, because I'd know my concerns were not taken seriously and that they had abandoned common sense and did nothing to attempt preventing a very real consequence of voting away mine and my daughter's right to health care. I equated it to a slow-motion car wreck with our daughter in mortal danger and him just watching it happen because it doesn't involve his own body. I know he needs to hear it. But I think I was too raw and open about it to steer the conversation in a healthy way, and I have a very blunt manner. I apologized this morning for saying that I'd leave him, even though I knew I would, and he tentatively accepted it. And I said we'd talk about things later when I can articulate things in a healthier way. But I'm at a loss as to how to make it known how deadly serious this is to me and not make him feel like I'd abandon our marriage over just any sensitive topic. I do not need people telling me to leave him. I don't think I know how to make it any more digestible and be clear without going nuclear over something that has not happened, as our daughter is too young to suffer that yet. The rub is that I am the person who is changing the dynamic of our relationship, and I'm beginning to understand how politics breaks up families. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Ask him to name scenarios that he would accept the premature death of his daughter. Ask him to name what life-saving healthcare he would be willing to deny for his daughter based on principles. If he can't name any, ask him why is abortion different. Use your cousin's story as a hypothetical for your daughter, but be as graphic with it as you can be. But in all honesty, if you must labor so much to convince him to care about yours and your daughter's health and well-being, then this should also serve as a wake-up call to you. And if I were you, I'd take back your apology. You meant what you said and only apologized to comfort him. I say let him be uncomfortable. Why are you so concerned with the bluntness of your words and not concerned about how quick he is to dismiss you? Comment 2. I'm the daughter of a Republican dad and liberal mom. I'm honestly not sure why they are still together, and think it is because they are older and retired. Luckily I live in a liberal state that doesn't take away human rights, so I think it allows my mom not to think about it as much. It's been since Trump that I've really seen the division between them. I don't really have any advice to give you, but the perspective from a daughter in a similar type of situation. I love my dad, but I don't have a lot of respect for him because I don't think he actually understands what's going on. It hurts as a daughter to know my dad votes for a party that is actively doing bad to a lot of human rights, mainly because he believes in the economics of Republicans. I also hate having to be around my parents in the evening, especially if they are watching the news. My mom definitely holds frustration for my dad and takes it out by saying mean things to him. And I feel like my dad doesn't take it seriously, because I don't think he actually understands how scary this is for certain people. I wish my parents would do therapy together, and honestly you guys should probably do therapy together if you actually want to make your marriage work without resentment growing. Comment 3. The worst part is all these men talk about the economics of being a Republican, when all the data shows time and time again that those economics are absolutely horrible for 99.9% of us. They literally will cause harm to their families and others because they believe lies and don't want to hear otherwise. Comment 4. I understand why you don't want advice to leave him, but you may have to accept that as your reality simply because your morals, values, and ethics are no longer compatible. But of course, do everything you can to try to reach him. Obviously, Deep down, you know him and know he has the potential. I went through this with my own husband years ago. And I wasn't nice about it. It was pretty much a deal breaker for me then, and now, and he was too busy being smugly libertarian on every other issue, so I had nothing to lose. That said, once he extracted his head from his rectum, I've been happy to explain things from my perspective as long as he's willing to actually listen. He's not perfect, but he gets a lot that men generally don't or take for granted. I do know that one of my big points was that his views meant I couldn't trust him. Women's reproductive rights sure don't affect men directly, but by not caring about the issue because they care about the women in their life, they are sending a clear message that women are interchangeable appliances. He either cares about the things that are important to you or he doesn't actually care about you. He can't claim to love and respect you and want a future with you if he's voting against your basic interests. That is hurtful for you, but you are allowing him to center his feelings hurt because you threatened to divorce him someday. He's hurting you now, but he wants to focus on his potential future pain that would be a direct consequence of his behavior now. Let that sink in. He is telling you exactly where you stand with him in multiple ways. Further, he's deluded if he thinks voting for Trump Republicans is going to actually be good for his finances. Maybe in the short term. The reality is that any gains he makes will be offset by the tax overhaul and tariff system. If your wealth is dependent on your income in any significant way, Trump winning would put your income at risk as women are forced out of the workplace and into a housewife role. If your income depends on either of you working overtime, Trump is giving employers a way to deny overtime premiums through creative scheduling. A lot of tax deductions and credits that primarily benefit low and middle class families are being eliminated while those that benefit the wealthiest are left intact or strengthened. We've already had a preview of his roided out trickle-down economy from his first term. Your husband is being incredibly short-sighted. Comment 5. I'm not sure what you are trying to achieve with this post. You say you don't need people telling you to leave him. However, the harsh reality is, in this situation, that is your present and your future, as long as you stick with Republican men. He is not a very good man when he puts your daughter's and every other woman's life at risk by voting for people who want nothing but destruction and power. That doesn't change, no matter how much you gaslight yourself that you can somehow fix him, or see reason. Sorry to be so blunt about it. Comment 6. This. If a man is a Republican, if he plans on voting for the GOP candidate, even if Trump keels over tomorrow and is replaced by someone who's less openly insane, if he is willfully ignorant, he is not a good man. Full stop. He can help old ladies cross the street and volunteer at a soup kitchen as a hobby, but he's still not a good man because he does not actually care about women. OP, you think you can fix your partner. You cannot. Nobody can fix another person. You can't be the person who is changing the dynamic of the relationship when you're not the bad actor. You should not have to explain why rolling back women's rights is fucked up to get someone to see that. He already knows and does not care. Update. We had a serious discussion. I went into more detail about my concerns and fears and it was intense. I was much better at presenting the case. I gave him several hypotheticals that involved a particularly gruesome set of circumstances involving his balls. I won't bore you with the nitty-gritty, but the gist was to shift his perspective. I told him to seriously consider carrying a tiny fetus in his ballsack and the fact that the risks were things like exploding balls, sepsis, etc., and the myriad of ways he could end up dead, permanently physically injured and disfigured, or unable to produce a fetus in the future if he didn't have the option of removing the fetus from his balls. I asked him if he would even want to take the risk and he agreed that he'd be very likely to remove it unless he was ready for those risks. I asked him why in the world would I be justified in telling him he has to carry it no matter what and it might only be removed after it starts to explode out of his ballsack or his organs start shutting down. Once he seemed to start grasping the enormity of what abortion encompasses and seeing why it's very important to not let unknown people control what options you have with no medical reason. I told him I lost a bit of respect for willful ignorance, and that I can tell he avoided thinking about it BC he knows in some way that it says something about his character. And I resented having to even give him a hypothetical in the first place and that if he cares for me and our daughter that he should automatically actively be using his empathy skills every day. I explained how I have demonstrated the capacity to care about and evaluate gender issues he's brought to my attention in the past. That was a difficult part of the conversation. I also told him that I do not trust him to always make good decisions for us and that I feel alone in shouldering those responsibilities. He listened and let me talk a lot. He asked if I was going to leave him and he was clearly nervous and bracing for the worst. I told him I'm not taking drastic steps like that, but I certainly will when it comes to keeping our daughter healthy and safe. I also started to say something about how I know I would lie to him in a heartbeat in a situation where our daughter needed an abortion or medical care, and he interrupted me to say, "You wouldn't have to lie because I'll be driving the car or buying the plane tickets and we will all go anywhere we need to." Y'all, I burst into tears. We ended the conversation and he said I laid a lot on him and he needed a break, but said he had things to think about. I didn't push any more politics, but I feel like my trust has been slightly restored. I'm not getting my hopes up, but I think he realizes that he's wading in dark and dangerous waters when it comes to our futures. Relevant comments. Comment 1. All of this reminds me so much of that scene in the show The Handmaid's Tale where June finds out that she's not allowed to access her bank account anymore and that her husband has to sign something for her to get birth control pills. And her husband dismisses her concerns, basically saying, "That's okay. I'll take care of you. No big deal, it's fine." It's easy to dismiss a concern when that concern doesn't seem to affect you directly. And the problem is that no matter what we say, no matter what example we give, some people will always have a degree of removal from an issue that can affect their understanding and their empathy. My own husband is empathetic and caring. But he doesn't understand why someone staring down the barrel of menopause, is so angry about abortion access restrictions. He doesn't understand why a woman in a loving marriage that doesn't look likely to end anytime soon, is upset about the end of no-fault divorce. Or why as someone with no connection to prison, is upset about our horribly inequitable carceral system. And he will say he understands my objections, but then he's like, why bother wasting energy getting upset about it? I don't know how to get across to him that just because it doesn't apply to me or us right now doesn't mean it won't later. I also don't know how to get across to him that it's very difficult to see attacks on our ability to get a divorce or access an abortion as a direct slap against me as a woman. If someone punches someone else like me in the face while staring me directly in the eye to show me that they would be doing it to me if they could, that's very upsetting. But they aren't looking him in the eye, so he doesn't see it that way. Comment 2. I admire the heck out of you for having this huge conversation with your husband. Thank you for making the case for all of us. And thanks for sharing with us. I hope your example can help others who need to have serious discussions like this with people in their lives. Comment 3. I'm glad you have this talk and that he is starting to reconsider his decisions. But I hope you are very clear with him that this isn't about him setting aside his views for the special case of you and his daughter. Other women are entitled to the same respect and autonomy that he wants for his daughter. If his position is that he will pack the bags and buy the tickets for y'all, but he will nonetheless continue to vote for all other women to be oppressed, he's not a good man. OP. We talked about the women getting turned away from emergency rooms across the country because they were having pregnancy complications for babies they likely wanted to keep, and it was like I could see a gear start cranking in his head. Total silence, like he'd never considered that a lot of women who seek emergency abortions actually wanted their babies. Comment 4. My husband and I had this discussion before our first was born. This was before Roe v. Wade was overturned, but the writing was on the wall that it might go. We live in a very HCOL city for my job, but things weren't going well, and we were debating moving. I told him that as long as kids were on the table, moving to a red state was out of the question. I refused to move to a place where I would not be able to get access to care that I needed and end up dead just because we were trying to have a child. My husband brushed it off. One of his close family members is one of the most prominent OBGYNs in the country. He said that, when the worst came to worst, she would help us out. But I said, how exactly? Imagine I'm suffering from sepsis and about to die, and the hospital I'm in literally will not perform an abortion. What exactly will she do? And he stopped in his tracks. That ended the discussion right there. My husband had simply never had to consider it before. At the time, we weren't seriously thinking about kids, so he hadn't really thought it through. In any case, in a few short years, Roe v. Wade was overturned, and I ended up pregnant with our first child. I'm currently pregnant with our second. We still have regular discussions about potentially moving. Never once subsequently has he ever considered a red state. Comment 5. So glad he finally understood the reason why we need to vote the way we do to protect our bodies. But is he going to back up what he says he now understands by voting the opposite of what he's done before? Comment 6. I hate that many men only recognize women's bodily autonomy when they become fathers. I hope you really talk to him about voting Republican this year, otherwise this whole thing is really moot. Comment 7. I'm glad he understood, but he still votes Republican. The Democratic Party is still right-wing. No, they are not leftist unless you're talking about the progressives, but your husband deliberately chose to vote for the more racist, ableist, sexist, bigoted in every way party. The only reason you had this discussion is because it affects you and your daughter on the basis of gender and sex. I'm not going to tell you to get a divorce, but you should probably take a good look at your own morals and principles if you still think it's okay for him to vote the way he does. Especially given everything that has happened since 2016. Editor's note: OP seems satisfied with her discussion with her husband, whether you disagree or not, so is unlikely to update. Therefore, I have marked this conclusion. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.